You know, one of the most important consoles ever released was the Sony PlayStation 2. What's going on, everybody? I'm Jay. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, appreciate you clicking on the thumbnail. If you're a return viewer, welcome back. Glad you're here. This month, we're talking about all things PS2. Every video released this month on a Tuesday will feature a PS2 theme, and we're kicking things off with what I feel is an important video. This is a video about the landmark series that launched on the PlayStation 2, and we are starting with the Thievius Raccoonus. Originally released in 2002, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus from Sucker Punch introduced me to a world of gaming that I adored from jump, and I still love to this day. While I don't love the Sly Cooper series as much as something like Ratchet & Clank or Mario, the character of Sly is one of those signature mascots that I just think of when I think of video games. And to me, Sly Cooper and Ratchet were the mascots for PlayStation. Even more so than Jak and Daxter, more so than Crash Bandicoot, Sly and Ratchet were the ones I thought of when I thought of the PlayStation 2 and characters that were synonymous with that platform. It's a fun stealth game that there are parts that haven't aged perfectly well, I will be honest with you, but the game itself is incredibly charming, and the characters and just the overall immersion in this kind of film noir style presentation of what Sly's world was like is worth playing today. There is a remastered version of all three games from the PS2 that was released on the PlayStation 3, and it's definitely worth checking out. And I think the whole series is fun, but the first one started something really special and should be praised for it. So if you've been on the channel for a while, you might be a little curious as to why I'm featuring this game on here, because I'm not a huge survival horror fan, but Fatal Frame is special. This originally released in 2001, and I'm a sucker for games that take a chance on a new gameplay mechanic. And while this isn't brand new, obviously we'd had Pokemon Snap before that, the idea of Fatal Frame and using the camera to actually attack and hunt the ghosts a little bit is pretty incredible. It's one of those game series that I frankly stated, like I said, I'm not a huge survival horror fan, so I enjoy watching people play more than I enjoy playing it myself, but there is just something special about this series and this game that makes it work. The game is purposely methodical in the way it presents itself. It's not slow, it's just kind of the nature of the design for the way it plays. It's something where you can really immerse yourself in the world and really kind of lose yourself and enjoy yourself in it, because it has you on edge the entire time. Fatal Frame is just one of those examples of taking a chance on a creative gameplay element and really, really sticking the landing. Devil May Cry is one of those series that I just look at and it just feels like a PS2 series, right? Like, this feels like it's at home on a Sony franchise, and there's just something special about the character of Dante and the world of Devil May Cry that just works. The game was originally conceived as Resident Evil 4 until designers kind of realized that the action motif of the game didn't really fit with the Resident Evil series, so they spun it off into its own thing, and that's where we got Devil May Cry from. The game is fantastic. It has a series of missions where you get a ranking based on your performance. The combat is fun, but the most memorable thing about the game is the writing and the presentation. Capcom, to me, is always at its best when it's not taking itself too seriously, when there's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek presentation, and Devil May Cry fits that bill perfectly. It is just a spectacular game. It originally released in August of 2001. It's just one of those signature PlayStation franchises that I think about when I think of the PS2. In 2004, Capcom released what was the first entry in one of the most remarkable landmark experiences in video games with the original Monster Hunter. Equal parts single player and multiplayer, this game is a landmark experience for anyone that is into action RPGs. You're able to outfit your character in any way you like. Each different weapon is going to have a different combat style, and you need to go out into the world and hunt monsters. I mean, it's right in the name. And it's a signature Capcom experience that I think is something that really shows their strengths in the early 2000s for working on the PlayStation hardware, because The game just works. I'm playing this almost 20 years after its initial release, and it is still a silky smooth combat experience with a fantastic gameplay element that Capcom just keeps iterating on and keeps evolving in every single mainline Monster Hunter release. It's a brilliant title, something that the video game industry needed, and something that is still being felt to this day. Believe it or not, this is one of the first times I've ever actually played a Jak and Daxter game, and this is the first game in the series. Jak and Daxter, the precursor legacy, released in 2001 in the early days of the PlayStation 2. This is developed by Naughty Dog, so if you have a love of Crash Bandicoot, or Uncharted, or The Last of Us, you should probably check out Jak and Daxter. Now, I'm not entirely sure why I never really tried these games before. It was just something I kind of missed. I was drawn in by Ratchet and Clank and Sly Cooper, and I just overlooked Jak and Daxter, and it's a shame because the gameplay is really fun. I'm thoroughly enjoying my time with this. The voice acting in the game is really fun. The look of the game is spectacular, and it's kind of a shame that this series has fallen by the wayside because it's a really, really charming game. I'm definitely going to be checking this one out more, and I'm also going to be looking into getting the HD collection on the PlayStation 3 because this is just a great example of fantastic 3D mascot platformers that the early 2000s were really known for.
I'm really sorry. Please, forgive me.
Aniki.
While I'm a big fan of the Yakuza series, I have to admit that I didn't actually know the first one was released on the PS2. Didn't know that till I was doing research for this video, because frankly, I kind of came to the Yakuza series late. My friend Chris told me about this series a couple of years ago, and told me about Yakuza Kiwami, which I played, bought, and loved, and I didn't actually realize that was a remake, just because the series kind of passed me by. It wasn't something I'd played upon its original release, but discovering that this originally released on the PS2 and playing it now, it's kind of remarkable what they were able to pull off in 2005. This game is fantastic. It's a wonderful series of games, first off. Like, the Yakuza series is magnificent, but even going back all the way to 2005 on this game's infancy, it's a magnificent release. It's such a fun game, and while the gameplay is really where it makes its bread and butter and where it really stands out, the characters and just the open world and the voice acting and everything that goes into building the world of Yakuza and what goes into making this a full-fledged gaming experience is kind of miraculous. It's a very brutal game. They don't mess around when they say there's scenes of intense blood and gore, because there are, and the language is decidedly hard. It makes full use of the M rating. Just understand that. It's brilliant, though. The game is absolutely wonderful. One of my favorite experiences, and such a fantastic signature PS2 game to play and enjoy. While I'm not the biggest fan of this series, it can't be overlooked as being one of the most important video game franchises ever released. And it all started on the PS2 with the original God of War in 2005. For everything that the series does incredibly well, I don't have a lot of fun with it, just because the combat for me is kind of mindlessly repetitive, and if I'm going to be just mashing buttons and working on combos, I want to do that in, like, a Devil May Cry, for instance. But the importance of the game cannot be understated. It's a ridiculously popular franchise. It has one of the most memorable protagonists ever in the history of video games. The layout and the look of the title is magnificent. It does so much perfectly well. The importance of the title cannot be understated, because it's just so important overall to both Sony as a video game developer and just the future of action-adventure video games. It's a great example of what early 2000s hack-and-slash games kind of were. It just did it better than anyone else did. While the games themselves don't really connect with me, there's something to be said, much like God of War, for the overall importance of Kingdom Hearts. You can't really understate how big of a deal it was when Square and Disney combined forces to make an action role-playing game starring fantastic Disney characters and signature Square characters in this own weird separate universe that kind of revolves around its own thing. Now, the gameplay itself, like I said, doesn't really land for me, but I know for a lot of people this is one of their favorite things. I just don't really get into the combat in this game, but I do like the sense of style, which is the main reason I've played through it. I'm a huge Disney fan, I have been my entire life, and being able to go to these different worlds in this game and the subsequent sequels that are from classic Disney films just makes me happy. It's something I really enjoy. I also really enjoy the memorable characters in this game from Squaresoft. Characters like Sora, like Kairi, like Riku. These are all characters that I enjoy and I appreciate because of their involvement in this series. It doesn't 100% connect for me, like I said, but it's still something that I look at and I see the value in and I see the importance of, and something I have played through. I really, really love the setting, and you cannot deny how important the overall series is for the video game industry. Katamari Damacy would be on this list alone if it was just the soundtrack. But when you take that incredible sound bed and you lay on top of it ridiculously charming gameplay and a reverent sense of humor and just a signature look that is so decidedly nothing but Katamari, I can't help but love this title. This was a game, when I originally discovered it, I wasn't sure I was going to like it. The second I popped it in and I played the tutorial, I realized the absolute brilliance of the game. It's just a ridiculously charming and fun game that has its own set of challenges and its own kind of sense of what you need to do, but it's not something where if you don't complete a level, you're going to get frustrated and not want to play again. You're going to want to try again and keep going with it because the gameplay is just really fun. Now, it's not for everybody. This is definitely a game where some people are just going to look at it and go, this is dumb, I don't want to spend my time on it, and I can't fault you for that. But for me, this is something that I sunk a ton of hours into, and I've since played nearly every game in the Katamari franchise because of this original release on the PlayStation 2 in 2004. I urge you to try this one out if you haven't, just because of the music alone, but I think the gameplay might hook you as well. It's so fun to go back and look at these incredible developers that started early on the PlayStation 2. And one of those is Insomniac Games with Ratchet & Clank. Now, Insomniac had done stuff before that, but I really think they came into their own when Ratchet & Clank released. Now, these are the guys that did Marvel Spider-Man, they have done the Spyro series, they have done Sunset Overdrive, they did the Resistance series. They're a brilliant development house that makes incredible games, but none of them, as much as I love Spider-Man and as much as I love that franchise, none of them come close to Ratchet & Clank. I love everything about this game. This game still plays brilliantly well. This game is 20 years old now, and it still plays nearly perfectly. The look of the game is spectacular. The voice acting is magnificent. The combat is perfect. The level design is creative and fun and encourages you to explore while still keeping you on a fairly linear path depending on what missions you're on. It's just a perfect game. Like, legitimately, as much as I love so many Sony franchises, nothing comes close to Ratchet & Clank. The first one is fantastic. You can play the remake on the PS4, and I urge you to do so if you haven't already, because it's brilliantly done, but even going back to the original PS2 release, you can't go wrong. And bonus on the original PlayStation releases, you get these awesome blueprint schematics in your instruction manuals. Definitely worth checking out the original releases. There you have it, my friends, 5 fantastic series that launched on the PlayStation 2 that in some cases are still going strong today. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite series were that started on the PS2. Remember, every video this month that launches on a Tuesday is going to be PS2 themed. Until next time, remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.